quick thank you to our listeners. We partnered with Mantra Matcha and Severista Coffee to give you exclusive discounts. Clean, steady matcha energy and smooth, low-caffeine coffee, no jitters. Use code BALANCE. Welcome to the Beats and Balance podcast, a space for conversations at the intersection of creativity, healing, and community. Each week, we sit down with artists, healers, and everyday people to explore stories of transformation, resilience, and the ways we use creativity to survive and thrive.
All right, welcome to the Beats and Balance podcast. Today we have Tyler Hurst, who is a plant medicine facilitator, yoga teacher, and wellness professional based in Phoenix, Arizona. His mission is clear and powerful: to help people let go of trauma that won't let go of them. Tyler's approach is deeply rooted in somatic healing and energetic alignment. After discovering the emotional healing power of chakra-based tones, he began incorporating a diverse range of sound practices into his sessions, including healing house music, live drums, sound bowls, tuning forks, gongs, and even voice modulation. His work invites people into deep release, remembrance, and resonance. You can find Tyler's offerings at Microdose Yoga or tune into his podcast, Master Plant Talk, available on all major streaming platforms. In this episode, we're going to talk about sound as medicine, the intersection of rave culture and healing, and what it means to create space where our bodies can finally exhale. All right, so let's get into it. Tyler, first and foremost, thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, thank you, Tanara. This is an honor. Great, thank you.
Yeah. All right, so let's talk about your healing journey first and foremost, and how you got into doing this work.
Right. So I started in. I was on psych meds for 16 years of 17 different psych meds. I was diagnosed early in college with started with bipolar, and first they thought I was schizophrenic. Then they decided bipolar. Then they decided anxiety. Then it was depressed. Then they figured out ADHD. So no one really knew what was wrong with me, which is why I had to take 17 different ones over 16 years. I noticed after I was on the last one, Lexapro, I was diagnosed. I was given it in 2009-ish, and my doctor gave it to me to take the edge off of Adderall. Which, looking back, like, are you serious? Like, are you kidding me? But I didn't understand how not to trust doctors, so I took that. I was on it for about 7 years, but about year 3 or 4, I had weird, just not great experiences on it. I guess they would be considered psychosis. Just a lot of trouble understanding how the world worked and how my body felt. Eventually, with the help of a talk therapist who was in every way different than me. She was shorter. We weren't the same economic background. We weren't the same cultural background. She was like fully disabled. Physically disabled, so just couldn't have been more different than I was. She helped me understand that what I had was complex PTSD. And so I decided that if all the doctors had tried all this stuff and it wasn't working, that I was going to start using plant medicine and eventually yoga to help myself feel better. And so what I did was, for the first couple of months, I would get really high, some really great, really clean, very well intentionally grown cannabis in Oregon, and I would dance with headphones on all down the streets, just around and around. And then after that, I did that for almost 2 years, and then I decided that I did not trade pills to then smoke cannabis all day. While I believe cannabis is a medicine, I believe overdoing anything isn't great. I started to incorporate chakra-based tones. I noticed that different parts of my body would hurt. So I would use different chakra-based tones to help just sort of get rid of pain in my body. And then I eventually found ayahuasca and sat with a bunch of ayahuasca ceremonies and noticed how the live music started to affect me even more. And that was 8 years ago. And I'm basically doing a version of the same thing now. Just I am helping other people do it. I'm not going through my own journey as much.
Yeah, very cool. Definitely resonates. I think we've been on similar paths. I also have CPTSD, and it took until I think I was maybe 30, late 20s or 30, before that was the diagnosis that I found for myself after years of you have anxiety, you have depression, you have this, you have that.
Right.
And also going through the medications. And then for me, I went off them cold turkey, and that kind of was terrible. But then it led me to plant medicine, which is how I kind of got my sanity back. So
wow.
I fully resonate with you. I'm listening to him damn, how are we all living the same life? because I've definitely been there.
For sure. Yeah, it took me 3 tries to get off Lexapro. The third time, because I had access to cannabis and I had access to tested cannabis that I had knew all what the terpenes were on cannabinoids, so I could like really program things. That's what I was able to do it. But it still took me, my brain didn't turn back on until like 4 or 5 months. So it was a rough summer of 2016, let's just say. So.
Yeah, it was around then for me too, actually. 2016, 2015 is when I cut cold turkey. And then it was like about a year of detoxing from my body. And then I found kava randomly.
Nice.
I went to a kava place and it kind of like reset my brain or something. I woke up the next day and I was like, oh, like this is how normal people feel.
Yeah,
and like
yeah.
I just started doing all this research after that, and it was just this journey. So like I started growing my own shrooms and like got real deep into it. But yeah, it definitely changed my life. Not to say that like, there's people that definitely need medicine, and if there's no shame in that, but for folks that are struggling, there are definitely alternatives that you should research and figure out for yourself. I think a lot of doctors, they do one size fits all, like, oh, I'm gonna just throw some pills at you and hope something sticks, and it ends up destroying your body. So
right. And then for some of us, I really think that a lot of psych medication should be time limited, like 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, a year. But they basically said you're going to be on this the rest of your life. And I was like, how am I, that doesn't make any sense to me at all. Like it didn't logically compute, but I didn't know it asked the question. So.
Yeah, no, and you brought up also good points with I don't think people realize the way in which all of these things, trauma, medications, the side effects of those things, it doesn't just affect like your mental health and your brain, but it also like has physical ramifications, body pain, things like that. So I thought it was really interesting how you brought up like using sound healing to help with your physical pain. You want to talk more about that? Like, how did you figure that out? Do you know like the mechanics of how that works? If you want to explain to people.
Well, first of all, I listened to just, playlists, whatever playlist I could do. I listened. I noticed that some songs made me feel a certain way and some songs made me feel other ways. I didn't really understand what that meant until I started. This is still in like 2016, 2017. I started to read Alan Watts. I'm sure you know who he is. For anyone who doesn't, he's a philosopher from the 50s and 60s. And just his idea of looking at the world really helped me. It wasn't any specific advice that changed it, but it just helped me look at things in a different way. And I don't know how it was. I'm sure it was at the cannabis club that we had in Portland. Portland had cannabis clubs for a short time. It was fantastic. It was like a bar, except it was cannabis. It was fantastic. They would come around, the growers would come around and bring different strains that we could all try. And they started playing different background music that would help soothe people during busy times. And I would use the Shazam app on my phone to try to figure out what that was. And I just, through experimentation, just going there, a couple times a week, I started to notice that certain tones made me feel a certain way, and other tones made me feel another way. And then, thanks to Alan Watts sort of opening up my idea to metaphysical and also the my therapist said the same thing. It's like, maybe you should try some things you haven't tried before. Like, and she said this, she goes, maybe you should stop listening. I know this is going to sound cliche. She goes, maybe you should stop listening to white people all the time. And I was like,
it's valid
okay,
advice.
That's actually a really good idea, because in my doctor's experiences, it was all clinician based and it was all the same type of older dude. And so I started to pay more attention to what other people were doing, or especially people who did not look like me. And I noticed that there was a bunch of just different tones. And so I started to play with different ones. I found the chakra system, just the 7 basic chakras. And I would just on a hunch, I got super stoned, and I was like, well, let's just try to see what, if my hips hurt, let's try to see the sacral or root stuff and see what happens. And I would sit there for 45 minutes to an hour, like a good meditation session. And I would just feel better after I got up. And I did not know why. It felt like something was loosening in me. It felt like something was releasing in me. And then I kept doing it. I only ever did it really up to my heart chakra, because that's where all my pain was. My pain was anywhere between, obviously, my root chakra and my heart. But it really just sort of undid things. And it wasn't until I then started yoga about, in early 2017, because I moved from Portland back to Phoenix. I started yoga where they started playing sound bowls and gongs. And I really noticed that I would just feel more calm, and it felt like I was being what's the word? It was sort of like a wave pool a little bit, but it was just sound was the waves. It felt like it was soothing me like water would.
Mm-hmm.
And I was amazed. Like I was like, there's no way I can ever prove that this works, but it does. And that was really my introduction to understanding how tones go. And I obviously looked up and saw what the frequencies were and started matching frequencies and using Apple Music and Spotify and YouTube and all that type of stuff. I started downloading things, and I noticed that whenever I'd have what I call an episode, which was, you want to call it a freak out, a emotional turmoil, outburst, whatever, I could use these tones to actually calm me down in the moment. And that was just a huge game changer, because I didn't have to turn to food or running 10 miles to tire myself out or yelling until I was too tired to keep talking. Or getting so high that I couldn't, function. I could turn to these tones that could really at least take the edge off. And that opened up a whole new world for me.
Very cool. Yeah. I mean, that's why we're called Beats and Balance, actually, because that was one of the first things that like helped shock me out of, I guess, long-term depression was I can't ever pronounce it right.
Binaural beats.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah.
Yeah.
That like changed my, like, I don't know what, and I've looked into like the science of it and I can't explain it, but whatever it's doing with the two different tones and you're syncing your brain waves and all that stuff, like I hadn't been able to get out of bed for like months and was like having like agoraphobia, like it was bad. And then I was just like trying anything, and the kava, all of that stuff kind of happened around the same time when I was living in California. Just like, I feel like it was a spiritual, like something led me there because it was so random. It made no sense. But those things combined, I was able to wake up and just be like, oh, wow, like now I understand like how normal people feel. And if you have like, from you mentioning like CPTSD, that's childhood trauma. So you're living with that your whole life. So you don't really know what normal is. Like you think that the way you've been living your whole life is normal.
Yep.
And so when you snap out of that fog for the first time, you're kind of just like, oh shit, like, it's mind boggling. But what people also, I think, I don't want to make folks feel like you do this one time and then boom, it's fixed. Because I fell into that trap of being like, oh, I healed myself, and then was super depressed when I realized like, no, this is not a one-time fix.
Right.
So let's talk about that journey with you and your development of microdose yoga and music as medicine, and how you continue to use this practice to not just help yourself, but to help other people.
Yeah. So speaking of one-time fixes, so I started yoga because I needed to strengthen my back, because as part of my episodes, I would hug myself or I would tense up so much that I would pop ribs out in my back, the little floating rib at the bottom of my right-hand side, which I couldn't put back ever. I'd have to sit. One time I had to sit for 3 days because my chiropractor wasn't open and it was horrible pain. So I need to strengthen up my back. And I did yoga for a couple months and had my first ayahuasca ceremony. And I was like, hey, I'm cured. I don't crave caffeine. I don't crave cannabis. I don't crave sugar. I spent honestly, it was probably 2 months. It was most of May and all of June, 2017, where I was actually for the first time not ingesting any, you could call them drugs, call them substances. It was nothing. I was just eating regular food, mostly plant-based, but still some meat in there. But I wasn't ingesting anything I didn't absolutely need to. And I realized I had never done that. I mean, I've been using caffeine or sleeping pills when I was a little kid. And then as you grow up, I used other things that were available to me. I was just shocked. And so I was still going to yoga, and I just realized that yoga was good. I don't know why it was good, but it was good. And I would notice I really love the sound healings because I could tell that they were calming. And they would honestly, gongs, for some reason, gongs are my thing. I don't know. I like all the music, but gongs specifically really help. And I could only get access to the gong in this sound healing. But I also noticed that sometimes, depending on either the movements I was doing or the amount of people, or let's just say the kind of emotional states of other people in the class, would start to affect me. I would start remembering when I would, let's say I'd go into a warrior pose and I would stretch my groin out a little bit. And I was like, oh my God, I remember that time in 8th grade where I pulled my groin. It hurt so bad. And I was so upset and I didn't know what to do about it. And I was like, wait, what? And I would get tensed up and I wouldn't be able to relax again. And so the yoga, I mean, it wouldn't be ruined, but I would never be able to get back to my state no matter what happened with the rest of the class. Because I couldn't tell the yoga teacher, hey, I'm having an episode. I need help regulating.
Mm-hmm.
So I started to think about, I was like, well, I noticed that I can control some of this stuff when I take certain substances. So I started with cannabis, of course, because that seems to be the easiest one to start off with.
The gateway
And
drug.
then and then about a year went by and I'm not making real great progress, but I'm sort of here and there. A friend who had just gotten a DUI and gone to rehab said, hey, I know how to reset your brain. I know what you're going through. And he gave me enough mushrooms to do 5 days, 2 on of a 1/4 gram per day for 2 weeks, and then a 1/2 gram, 5 on, 2 off for another 2 weeks, and then 3/4 of a gram, which is a very high microdose. But my tolerance built very quickly, so it didn't feel that much.
Mm-hmm.
And I noticed, oh my God, I feel different. I could actually, wanted to get a job outside of my house. I wanted to go back and work retail. I wanted to go out and do things. I wanted to go out and talk to people. It wasn't something I normally did. Usually it was yoga or yoga related events and then nothing else for about 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
I did a little bit of that. And I noticed that if I had something left in my system, yoga was different. I was like, that's really strange. Then I happened to get connected through my ayahuasca group, through AYA down in Tucson. I happened to get connected with someone who does mushroom ceremonies regularly. And what she would do is she would give us a 4-gram blend of 60 different strains.
Mm.
And part of my experience was I would then do yoga sometimes during the ceremonies. She would tell me to, hey, she could tell, hey, you're having an episode, or hey, you do yoga, do a routine. I would do it. And I was like, well, I would feel different. So it sort of all connected in my head. I was like, well, if I feel this way during this time, then why don't I try some of the strains during other times? And through her tutelage and through I had some immense just luck and privilege of being able to have access to a grower who grew a bunch of different strains of mushrooms. And I was able to try each one. I was able to try all 60. It took me a little while.
I'm like, wow.
Yeah, it was rad. Well, it was tough, but rad.
Yeah.
And I realized that some strains did certain things. So I started using blends, like 3-strain blends, because I figured after three, it gets a little bit muddied. You can't really tell what's going on, or it gets just to be too much during certain classes. So I would use mostly body-based strains. And then what happened is I noticed that when I would go to a certain pose and I would have that emotional reaction from whatever injury or whatever, emotional state was coming up, I could still feel it. My body wouldn't react to it. I would be able to sort of separate myself from it, and I'd be able to sort of coach my way through it, almost like my spirit was separate from my body, which I know that now, but I didn't know that at the time.
Yeah.
I was able to separate the two, and I could sort of coach myself through, and that opened up just a whole nother level of healing for me, because finally, again, now I knew how to use a readily available substance to me to help regulate myself in the moment. And I did that for 2 years, a year and a half, and then I started holding events for other people using similar blends. So
That's very cool. I thought I knew a lot about mushrooms, but 60 different strains is wild.
yeah,
Do you document? Like, were you doing like journals or?
yeah. I was taking at the time. I usually would take up to a gram, usually about a gram, and sometimes I would take larger doses. But you can only do that once, maybe once a week if you're lucky, like once every 2 weeks type thing. I would document stuff, and I would be like, this one makes me feel this, and this, and I felt this episode or whatever else. And then after that, you sort of got an emotional memory of them. You wouldn't have to document as much because you're like, oh, I know this. I know what this is for. I know what this is for. Because they're all different, but they're not all that different.
Okay.
You sort of get into these are, for cannabis nomenclature, indica versus sativa.
Gotcha.
It wasn't quite the same, but it was the same in principle. And I figured out which ones were easier for your body or easier for your brain. And it was a really cool privilege to be a part of that.
That is amazing. All right, so let's talk about now how you help other people integrate what they experience during the ceremonies, because it's deep work. Like, it's not working with these plants can take you. You can have a really fun light trip, or you can go real deep, dark places. And having a guide there with you, somebody that can guide you through that is kind of key for a lot of folks. But it's also heavy work to do, especially for somebody that has their own trauma.
Yeah.
I think I can speak for myself, but I think most people that I know also that have trauma tend to be very empathetic and can kind of sponge everybody else's emotions around them. So Tell us a little bit about how you help people integrate, and then also how you can like maintain boundaries with yourself so that you're not kind of burning out doing this work.
Yeah, so I did it first, to be honest with you. I did. I was working both with this AYA group down in Tucson with ayahuasca, and I was also working with this lady doing the mushroom strains, the mushroom ceremonies. And I would take a full 4 gram, well, sometimes more than 4 grams of the 60 plus strains, and I would then help people in ceremony. And I would feel everything they were going through. I would experience it almost as my own. It took me a little while not to purge when other people were purging. I had a really awesome, I sat one time in a sweat lodge with a Mayan family or Mayan descendant family, and they taught me how to move energy and move it around. And they didn't speak English and I didn't speak Spanish. So that was an interesting experience. And they helped me separate from it. They literally showed me and how to move the energy around using your hands and everything. And so I had this little bit of experience coming in this microdose yoga things. For one, I never take a new blend for the first time in a session. It's always at least my second time. And I've taken all the strains before, but I always experiment with the blend. When we do deeper work, when we go up to like an afternoon ceremony, we might have 1 to 2 grams, or an overnight ceremony, we have 4+ grams. I always take less than them now.
Okay.
Before, when I would call it sort of like boot camp for plant medicine because it was hard. I would be in it with everyone, and now I realize like, hey, I don't need to do that as much. So I would take less because I didn't actually need to, because I was already feeling most of what they felt anyway. So I didn't actually yell at that type of thing. From there, it was a lot of grounding. I would use a lot of indigenous tools. There is a red sash you wear around your waist that I was taught that by men typically do during temazcals and other ceremonies in this Mayan descendant tradition that helps them helps them stay rooted and block out other energies. Apparently, women don't need to do it as often because their womb helps with that. I don't know. I'm not a woman, can't speak to it.
Yeah,
that's what I was just explained. A lot of grounding. We use mapacho, which is a South American tobacco, which is a grandfather spirit, which helps ground. We use also hape or rape, which is a ground up version of the same thing, mixed with different herbs by South American tribes. Spend a lot of times in float tanks. Spend a lot of times outdoors, walking barefoot, touching the ground. Spend a lot of times just dancing. I will just get up and do a static dancing to whatever song comes on all the time. And that's how I keep sort of boundaries, and I keep the separation between me and my, I guess I call them clients. It feels really weird to call them clients, but they almost always end up being friends, but people I work with.
Yeah.
And then as far as integration calls are our best one. We do at the end of every ceremony, we do a integration plan of like, hey, you have this affirmation. You're going to say this affirmation certain times a day. We're going to call each other in a week or so, about every week-ish, maybe 2 weeks-ish, just check in things, and you're going to journal. And I've tried with more than that, but most of the times people are able to make like 1 or 2 changes and that's it. And that's what I really want them to do, is just make that 1 or 2 change. So the affirmations and some small adjustments of like, hey, instead of having 2 drinks a day, have 1 type of thing, or instead of having 3 joints, maybe have 2 type of, just sort of adjustment.
Yeah.
And affirmations, like instead of saying I hate this, say I love this. And I explain to people, I don't mean that you like it. I mean that you're bringing love into something that you hate. And sometimes those little perspective changes are really helpful. And this took the longest. This took probably until I went to Peru last year. Not going to lie, till I went to Peru in September and got shamanic actual help. Letting go of the outcome. That was the biggest
surrender.
Problem. Yeah, because I really wanted to think that I could help people, and I can, but I'm not healing them. What I do is I create a safe container for them to heal themselves, and that's my only job. And really letting go of the outcome of, hey, if this doesn't do what I hope it does, it doesn't mean it's a failure. It depends on the person that I'm helping, how much they want to heal or they want to get better, because I can't do that for them. And so once I really let go of that, that's helped it become easier. But for a while, I mean, I would be knocked out for a week or 2, at least every ceremony, whether it was a 3-hour microdose yoga or an overnight experience. I would be out for a week or 2. Thankfully, I have a spouse that has a normal job who has okayed all of this type of stuff. which allows me to stay, fed and clothed. Because healing work, while righteous and amazing, it doesn't always pay that well, because a lot of times the people who need help the most, the people who are at least able to afford it, and you want to be able to offer that while still, making sure that you're energetic. There's at least some sort of energetic exchange. So
yeah, no, that's real. I think also it can be hard to monetize, and I think also when you have been the person that has healed from the thing, immediately you're just like, oh, I want to share this with everybody.
Yeah.
Like that was it for like when I started growing mushrooms, I was just handing them out to like, who wants to try, you got to try this for free. Everybody, like I was like the fucking mushroom fairy. And then you realize like, oh, this stuff, like you have to live and life isn't free. But yeah, everything you said is super resonant. It is deep and heavy work, and holding space for people is also deep and heavy work. Let's talk about like the spiritual side of things. You mentioned a lot about like using and diving into and learning about Indigenous practices. How has that been like? And we'll make it deep. Like as a white person going into these spaces, like how do you feel like approaching these folks, and how are you able to like respect their culture and still enter into these spaces and develop like relationships with people that, like you said, like sometimes they don't even speak the same language as you? Yeah, because like I think a lot of people like, and I'm of the theory that like the world, like we're all connected and we all need to share our knowledge, and that's how we're all going to thrive and survive, right? But there are politics still, and there are like customs and things to take into effect, and ways in which to do things in respectful ways. So I think it's always good for people when they're new to these things to like keep that in mind, is that like you're entering into the spiritual space for a lot of folks. So how have you managed that?
Well, the first one that I do every single time, and this was a lot easier when I used to have a full-time job as a marketing, actually for a cannabis company, so it was a little easier, and it's a little tougher now, but I still manage to do it, is pay people. That's been the number one thing, no matter how much it is, $5, $10, $15, $20, $100. I mean, and then up to like, I went to Peru and that $2,000. Pay people up front. Don't wait until afterwards. Just donate something, whatever you can afford. Do it that way. That shows, I think, for me that, hey, I'm going to take your time seriously, and even if I don't show up, I still have given energy to you. Like I'm still help, and you can do whatever you want with that. Like there's nothing. Obviously, I don't have any control where they spend on. But that's the first one. For me don't ask for discounts. Don't try to trade something because you have no idea what they value. Just offer an energetic exchange in the form of money. Again, it doesn't always have to be the full price, but that's where I start. Is like, here's, there's a guy named Reggie Hubbard, who I met a couple months ago at a trauma release thing in Sedona, and he has these donation based classes. So every time I sign up, I just send a payment over. Just again, it's like $15, $20, but that way there's no question of like, hey, I'm in it. I'm good. We're done as far as that concerned.
Yeah, you're not extractive.
Second is I'm very careful. I'm sorry. Did you want to?
No, I was just saying you're not being extractive, like off the bat.
For one, yeah. Second is I do not ask them to help me get over my guilt of the white guilt I have for all these things, because I know that most of the problems in the U.S. and probably in the world came from people who look a lot like me. Like I know that. Like I completely understand that. I accept that. I'm not happy about it. I personally, obviously, didn't do anything about it, but I enjoy a ton of privilege because of that, and I understand that. But the last thing that I want to do is to make someone who's been fucked over handle my guilt about it. Like, I'm so sorry. Don't go in and saying you're sorry. Don't go in and ask for forgiveness, because that's just not something that's possible, because it's not really forgivable yet. It might be one day, maybe reparations or stopping colonization, but that's a whole different story that I don't have control over yet. So letting go of that guilt, and I don't mean not feeling guilty. I'm saying letting go of the need to express it and want justification for it. That's a big one. Don't change anything. A lot of these type of calls that I've been to are all in Spanish. I don't speak Spanish. I understand many words, but I don't speak it well enough to understand as far as they're going. I do not expect them to translate for me ever. Like that's my problem. If I don't know Spanish, like I've been in Arizona now for 16 years, like I should have learned Spanish, and I do practice Spanish, but for whatever reason, it's not sticking. I probably need to do a microdosing regimen and just hammer into it.
Yeah.
But don't expect accommodations. That's a big one. If it's too hot, if you're not as comfortable as you'd like to be, if you can't understand the actual words of what's going on, just look at everyone else and just do what they do. That's been a really easy one for me, just to sort of follow everybody. Now, again, my empathy probably helps with that because I can sort of read the room and figure out what's going on pretty easily. And after that, if you get asked to help with something, do it. I've been honored a couple of times I often give people hape or rape during ceremonies, usually a lot of times everybody. And that is a really cool thing to be able to do. People would then offer me an energetic exchange, like they've got me $5, $10, and I never wanted to accept it. But at the same time, I'm not going to fight this custom. Like, this is what they want to do, so I'm not going to push it at all. So a lot of times the events I would go to would end up being washes, because I would go in and I would donate and go in, and then I would work, but then they would contribute too. So it was sort of a very even exchange.
Yeah.
But yeah, not try to change anything. Don't try to adjust anything. Don't try to be more comfortable. Don't try to say, hey, I know a way you could do this better. Well, I'm sure that you probably could. I'm sure you could probably figure a way to make it more efficient or cheaper, but that's not the point at all. And that's been basically the three things that I've really tried to do. But I honestly think that, and I don't want it to all be about money, because I know it's all not always about that, but I think that's the biggest one that I've really done, is just pay up front. Don't fight, and don't fight that at all. It's what you can do. It's what they're asking. And then sort of, shut up when you get there.
Yeah, I think that's all valid advice. I think that's what I do too. I don't going into people's spaces and respecting them and their time, and their efforts. So yeah, 100%. I agree with all of that. All right. So before we get out of here, one thing that we did not touch on, I know you do work with rave culture and house music. But at Beats and Balance, we're also big on that. I'm a DJ. So that's kind of how we all got started with this. So let's dive into that real quick. Like, talk about how you see the connection between house music, rave culture, and healing for you.
Yeah. Okay. So first of all, I love raving. I love ecstatic dancing. I love all kinds of. It's just I feel great once I do it. There's this place called Walter Warehouse here in Phoenix, where they have these events. It's a warehouse owned by a group named Walter. They're a bunch of Burning Man, both Burning Man attendees and Burning Man types. They hold these dances in a warehouse. I went once on MDMA with my partner. She had never tried MDMA before. I had a couple of times, and I always wanted to do a mushroom dance, but mushrooms don't really lend themselves well for large groups of people at all.
Yeah, no, I don't think so either.
And I noticed when I was on MDMA, I'm pretty experienced psychedelics and substance wise, but they could tell, like of course, because you can always tell, like it's obvious. And they were so nice. Like they were, no one was like, oh, are you on something? They were never, they was like, hey, do you want some water? Hey, you good? Hey, need anything? Like they were just asking to be nice. And it was the first time I had gone to, and this is probably 4 or 5 years ago, when I started going to Walter, because my brain didn't want to go anywhere before that. I realized, like, hey, a lot of people here are probably on substances, or they are dancing so much and they're feeling such good that they're getting the same experiences that a substance might give you without actually having to take it. It just takes more work to get there. I always like to say that, hey, we could all be monks. We could all be monk-like if we took mushrooms all the time, or we could spend years of our life, training, which doesn't always work for everybody. We can't all go live in the forest by themselves. Yeah. But so I just noticed that everybody seemed really, really nice, and everyone seemed like they were going through something. I could just tell, because when you're definitely when MDMA, your empathy is up to the max. And that's, for me, I could almost see through people. Like, it was just very obvious who was having a good time, who wasn't, who was on something that probably shouldn't have been on. And I noticed that, again, certain songs made me feel a certain way. So I started looking up different DJs and different DJ groups just to see how they felt. Like, so there was Dea Dova was one of them. Alchemira Euphoria out of Denver was another one. And Lincoln Jesser was a third guy. But I noticed especially the Alchemira, and I'll give the actual thing. There's two ladies out of Denver were actually bringing in healing chakra tones into their mixes.
Very cool.
And I started to listen to them, and I started doing ecstatic dances, and I realized that I would get not quite the same, but I would get a similar experience to like an hour of meditation and an hour of dancing after a half an hour of just doing these same tones with the dancing. and it really switched it was like one of those like where the camera zooms in, or the camera pulls back while it zooms in. It was like, whoa, okay, these tones are doing something. And it was so combined with the just how happy everybody was, because when I grew up I was taught that raves were dangerous, raves were scary, mostly because people were on like 8 or 9 tabs of or not tabs, but 8 or 9 doses of ecstasy. That's what they called it back in the late 90s at once, which, yeah, that's probably not a great idea. But the raves themselves weren't scary at all. They were just in weird places back then because that's where you had to go in order to get away from everything.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, oh my God, these people are super nice. They're like me. I don't know if that was normal, but they were like me.
Mm-hmm.
And so noticing that some of the music would hit me a certain way, especially those by those artists I mentioned, just really solidified that all of this was just really healing. Yes, it was commercialized. Yes, it was capitalistic. Yes, some people took advantage of that. Yes, there was all kinds of problems, involved in those cultures, all sorts of misogyny and racism and ableism and homophobia, I'm sure. But in this group, there wasn't that. As much, at least it wasn't obvious to me. I'm sure some of the stuff that I just couldn't pick up on, being a able-bodied cisgendered dude, but it just felt really open. And seeing what they were doing behind the scenes with the songs, and then feeling how the experience felt really sort of clicked. And I was like, wow, we should probably all be doing this all the time. We should all be on some low dose of MDMA and just go dancing, and our lives would be so much better if we could all do that weekly or monthly at least, type thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
100% agree. I went to a rave recently for the first time, sober. I'd gone to raves back like 15 years ago. Definitely not sober. And so to go this time and be like, oh, like I had the same kind of experience where it just kind of felt like all love. There were people of all ages there. Like there was a guy who had to be 70, just like going crazy. And I was just like, wow. Like I kind of wish I had been like less, not completely sober, maybe in my 20s, but I wish I had been like less high to like really fully experience what that was like. Cause it was like, oh, this is not just like a drunk mess. Like this actually feels really nice and healing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I totally 100% feel what you're talking about. Thank you so much for having this conversation. I feel like we touched upon a lot of different things. Is there anything else that you want to talk about, or anything that you have coming up that you want to plug?
I do want to talk about, so microdose yoga. I ended up, so I used to teach a regular trauma release yoga class regularly at a studio. I started incorporating the songs that I'd hear at raves into my yoga class, which sounds really strange because you're like, how the hell does that work? But it really does, because of the tones they use. And I got a lot of really good results of people having full releases during a normal yoga, during sober. I was sober. I assume they were sober. I was sober. And that was a really cool experience too, similar to how you experienced that at the rave. It was a cool thing to see. So you can incorporate it in different ways. It just depends on how you work through. You don't have to go to a full out rave to be able to have that experience. As far as what's coming up, I have microdose yoga. It's once a month on Saturdays. We have or once a month on the third Saturday of the month. We my ceremonial partner, I guess you could say, co-leader Amanda. She and I do me and her with up to 4 people. And then we also have once a month overnight ceremonies. We call those cosmic dances. And those are more focused on facilitators. So our desire is we always go into spaces and we're sort of like the older brother and older sister of the spiritually, not actually, of the groups. So we found a lot of success in helping those. So those are on the second, usually on either the first or second Saturdays of the month. And my goal is to help introduce people to psychedelics, and then they can go to maybe larger ceremonies. Then they can go to Peru. Then they can get deeper healing in other ways. So. Yeah.
Very cool. And also tell people where they can listen to your podcast, because you also have your own podcast, Master Plant Talk.
Yeah. So Master Plant Talk is all about, master plants. And it's mostly ayahuasca based right now. Master Plant Talk is on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Overcast, all the places. I interview various people who have gone through ayahuasca experiences, and we're working on some scientists that are researching ayahuasca. We just finished it's not obviously not an official study. We just finished a veterans ceremony on Memorial Day where a couple of participants wore EEG headbands. So we actually have brain scans of before and after ayahuasca experiences, and the differences are staggering. Very cool. So I'm going to have her on in a couple of weeks. And then I also have my own, have my own podcast, which I haven't updated a bunch of times, but it has my whole journey from 2017 through 2021. So it's a really cool listen. That's called the Burning Bush podcast, which I've gotten a lot of flack from religious types because it's not about religion. It's about burning bush.
That makes sense.
The point of that one is we smoke a joint and we talked for an hour and a half, which was harder to do than people think, but it doesn't sound that bad. And then if you ever want to check out my work, literally microdose.yoga. That's the URL. There's a sign up thing where I send out event lists about every month or so. So that's how to find me.
Awesome. But definitely we'll check out all of those things. Sounds so aligned with everything we're doing here. Thank you so much for being a guest. It's been great. It was a great conversation. And
yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Everybody listening, thank you. And we will be back next week.
Our vibes stay sacred. Our roots run deep.